If you drive through Europe, you'll quickly notice something strange about the trucks on the road. A flat front, almost like someone cut the nose off the truck. The driver sits high in the cabin, almost directly above the road. In many models, the driver is positioned almost above the front axle. But if you travel to the United States, the trucks look completely different. A huge hood, long nose, a massive engine stretching far out in front of the driver. The contrast is impossible to miss. Two modern trucking systems, two completely different truck designs, which raises a question. Why did Europe remove the nose from their trucks? The answer has almost nothing to do with engine size or power. Instead, it comes down to a rule most people have never heard of, a rule that quietly shaped the entire design of European trucks. To understand why European trucks look this way, we first have to look at the design itself. Most trucks in Europe use something that's called a cab-over design. The name is actually very literal. The cab, where the driver sits, is placed directly above the engine. The cab over the engine. Instead of a long hood with the engine in front of the driver, the engine sits underneath the cabin itself. That's why European trucks look so flat. Because of this layout, the driver sits much further forward than in an American truck. It's an extremely compact design, and that compactness is exactly the point. By placing the engine under the cab and removing the long hood, the entire truck becomes significantly shorter. And in trucking, even a small reduction in length can make a big difference. Because a truck isn't just a truck. It's part of a much larger vehicle, the truck and the trailer together. The shorter the truck is itself, the more room there is for the trailer that carries the cargo. And that's where the real advantage begins. Cab-over trucks are actually extremely common across much of the world. You'll see them across Europe, throughout Japan, in South Korea, and in many dense urban regions where road space is limited. At first glance, the cab-over layout might look unusual, but it wasn't created just to look different. It exists because engineers were solving a very specific problem. And to understand that problem, we have to look at the other type of truck, the ones that dominate the highways of the US and much of North America. Compare that, and you'll see what the difference is. Instead of the flat front, American trucks usually have a long extended hood stretching out in front of the driver. The engine sits entirely in front of the cabin, creating that classic long-nose silhouette that many people associate with heavy trucks. This design is called a conventional truck. In a conventional layout, the driver sits behind the engine rather than above it. The hood covers a large engine bay, and the front of the truck extends several meters before the cab even begins. Visually, this changes the entire appearance of the vehicle. Where a European truck ends almost immediately at the windshield, an American truck has that long nose that almost feels like the front of a train. But the long hood isn't just about style. There is a practical reason for this layout. With the engine placed in front of the cab, mechanics have easier access for maintenance and repairs. The hood can simply tilt forward, exposing the entire engine bay. Cooling systems can also be larger, which historically helps manage heat produced by a large diesel engine pulling heavy loads across long distances. And because the engine sits in front of the driver rather than underneath the cabin, the cab itself can be quieter and cooler during longer trips. For decades, this design became the standard across all of North America. It's the truck shape seen in countless movies, highway photos, and trucking documentaries. But here's where the story really becomes interesting. If you place a European cab-over truck next to an American conventional truck, the difference looks like a design choice, as if engineers on two continents simply preferred different styles. But that's not what happened. The real reasons these trucks look so different has almost nothing to do with engineering preference. Instead, it comes down to something much less visible: traffic regulation. And those rules completely changed how trucks were designed on each continent. To understand why European trucks look the way they do, we have to look at something most drivers never think about: vehicle length laws. Across Europe, trucks have to follow strict limits on total vehicle length. And that total length includes everything the truck in front and the trailer behind it. For a standard semi-truck in the European Union, the maximum allowed length is typically 16.5 meters. That number includes the entire vehicle combination: the tractor, the trailer, everything. And that rule creates a very important constraint. If the truck itself becomes longer, the trailer must become shorter, because the trailer is where the cargo goes. Every meter of trailer length means more pallets, more products, and more goods transported in a single trip. For logistics companies moving thousands of loads every day, even small differences in cargo space can quickly turn into a large financial difference. So engineers designing trucks for the European market had a clear problem to solve. They needed to keep the truck as short as possible so the trailer could stay as long as possible. And the easiest way to shorten a truck is to remove the long hood in front. Instead of placing the engine in front of the driver, engineers moved it underneath the driver. The result was the cab-over design. This single design decision allowed trucks to maximize cargo capacity while still staying within the legal limit of 16.5 meters. And once the cab-over layout proved efficient, it quickly became the standard across Europe. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because Europe wasn't the only place that had this problem. For a while, American trucks looked surprisingly similar. The United States once used cab-over trucks too. In the 1950s, 60s, and even into the 70s, cab-over trucks were actually very common on American highways. Flat front, driver sitting high above the road, almost no nose in front of the cab. And the reason was simple. At the time, the United States also had regulations that limited the total length of a truck and trailer combo, just like Europe. So American truck manufacturers solved the problem in the exact same way that European manufacturers did. But then something changed. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, transportation laws in the United States began to shift. The rules about vehicle length were rewritten. And that change would completely transform the shape of American trucks. Because once the regulations changed, the reason for cab-over trucks slowly disappeared. One of the most common standards today is a 53-foot trailer, which is about 16.1 meters long. That measurement refers only to the trailer itself, not to the tractor pulling it. Now, this might sound like a small technical detail, but it completely changes how trucks are designed. Because once the trailer length is fixed, making the truck itself shorter doesn't allow you to carry any more cargo. The trailer is already as long as it's allowed to be. So the main advantage over the cab-over design disappears. And once that advantage disappears, engineers are free to rethink the entire layout of the truck. Many manufacturers began returning to the conventional long-nose design. There were several reasons for this shift as well. First, placing the engine in front of the cab made maintenance easier. Secondly, the larger engine bay allowed for better cooling systems. And third, the long hood created more space and separation around the driver's cabin. Once those advantages became clear, conventional trucks slowly replaced cab-over trucks across most of the American market. By the 1990s, cab-over trucks had largely disappeared from long-haul trucking in the U.S. Today, they do still exist in some specialized roles, like urban delivery or port operations, where maneuverability is important. But on the American highways, the long-nose truck became king. And with these new regulations in place, there was no longer any economic reason to go back. But regulations and cargo space aren't the only factors that shape these trucks. There's another important piece to the story: the people who actually drive them. For truck drivers, the design of the truck isn't just about engineering or regulations. It's about daily life. In the United States, many truck drivers spend days or even weeks on the road, traveling enormous distances between cities and states. A single trip can easily cover thousands of kilometers. And because of that, the truck often becomes more than just a vehicle. It becomes a small living space. And this is where the long-nose truck offers some clear advantages. With the engine sitting at the very front of the cabin, the driver is physically separated from much of the heat, noise, and vibration. That separation can make long drives noticeably more comfortable. The long hood also creates a natural buffer zone in front of the driver. In the event of a collision, there is simply more structure between the driver and whatever the truck might hit. But the biggest difference is behind the seats. Long-nose trucks often have large sleeper cabins attached to the back of the cab. These sleeper sections can include beds, storage compartments, small refrigerators, and space for personal belongings. For drivers who live in their trucks for extended periods, that extra room makes a significant difference in daily life. European trucking works a little differently. Routes are often shorter, and drivers typically return home more frequently. Because of this, European trucks usually have smaller sleeper compartments. The cab-over design also limits how much space can be added behind the driver without increasing the overall vehicle length. So while the cab-over design is excellent for saving space on the road, the long-nose truck often provides a more spacious living area for drivers. But driver comfort isn't the only practical reason cab-over trucks work so well in Europe. The roads themselves play a big role too. Another reason cab-over trucks fit Europe so well comes down to the roads they drive on. Much of Europe's infrastructure is older and more compact than what you would typically find in the US. Many cities were built hundreds of years before trucks even existed. Streets can be narrow, intersections can be tight, and industrial areas often have limited space for larger vehicles to maneuver. In these environments, the overall size and turning ability of a truck matter a lot. And this is where the cab-over design has a major advantage. Because the front of the truck is shorter, the distance between the front axle and the trailer connection is reduced. This allows the truck to make much tighter turns compared to a long-nose design. In many cab-over trucks, the driver is positioned almost directly above the front wheels, which helps drivers see and control tight turns more precisely. For drivers navigating crowded streets, small warehouses, or tight loading docks, that maneuverability makes a big difference. A cab-over truck can position its trailer more precisely and move through spaces that would be far more difficult for a longer conventional truck. In the United States, the situation is often very different. Highways are wider, industrial zones are larger, road networks were designed with large vehicles in mind. But even in Europe, truck design is slowly starting to evolve. For decades, European trucks stayed almost completely flat in the front because every centimeter of length had to be saved. But recently, those rules have started to change. The European Union has actually begun allowing slightly longer truck cabins in order to improve safety and fuel efficiency. This opened the door for a few new designs with small aerodynamic noses at the front of the cab. These extended fronts help airflow more smoothly around the truck, reducing drag and improving fuel economy on long highway routes. Even small improvements in aerodynamics can save significant amounts of fuel when trucks travel thousands of kilometers every week. The new designs can also improve safety. A slightly longer front allows better driver visibility and adds more protective structure between the truck and pedestrians or cyclists in the event of an accident. The trucks are still compact, but they're no longer perfectly flat anymore. And that change reveals something important about how trucks evolve. So European trucks didn't lose their noses because engineers preferred that design. They lost them because every centimeter of vehicle length mattered. Strict limits forced manufacturers to push the cab forward, place the engine underneath, and remove the long hood completely. In the United States, those same limits eventually disappeared, and once trailer lengths became the main restriction, there was no longer any advantage to shortening the truck itself. And that allowed American trucks to evolve in a completely different direction. 2 continents, 2 rule books, and 2 very different trucks. But before we finish, there is one interesting question. If the same rules applied everywhere, which truck design would actually win? The compact European cab-over that saves space and turns easily in tight cities? or the long-nose American truck with more driver comfort, space, and that classic highway look? Which one would you choose and why? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more documentaries about trucks and how the industry works, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.